Episode 55, The Love Tree. As Brad remembered, it seemed like only yesterday that he was spending much of his free time with Scarla. They were inseparable since they began dating a couple years ago, but an afternoon at the garden right in the heart of town changed everything. Brad was never one who would believe in superstitions. He would always take stories involving superstitious beliefs with a pinch of salt. So one day when Scarla wanted to go to the garden to visit the love tree that she heard about, Brad was less than thrilled. Scarla persisted and told Brad that by hugging the tree together, the couple would tie their relationship for a lifetime. Hearing this, not only did Brad think that such beliefs were ridiculous, Brad also was neither fond of being under the hot weather in the afternoon, nor was he interested in visiting nature. But as Brad wanted Scarla to stop whining, Brad eventually agreed. Finally, the day came. They went through the entrance and saw the massive garden before them. There were many families that day, with kids running around and having the time of their lives. After walking around for a bit, Brad realized that he was surprisingly enjoying his time there. He didn't know that nature could bring him so much calm and made him feel at ease. Shortly after, they took the buggy to go around before they eventually arrived right in the middle of the garden. They got off the buggy and, standing there, was the enormous love tree, which looked like it had been there for over a century. At that point in time, there was no one else there. So Scarla pulled Brad, who hesitantly walked over towards the tree. Scarla persuaded Brad to hug the tree together with her for a good 5 seconds. After which, they leaned against the tree. Scarla took out her phone and began snapping selfies of themselves. Once done, the couple then continued driving around the buggy, and when the evening sky began to hover over them, they decided to head home. Later that night, while Brad and Scarla were back in their respective homes, they chatted on the phone like they always do before going to bed. However, as they were on the phone, Brad could hear that Scarla was beginning to sound nasally, as though a flu was coming. Brad then told Scarla to head to bed as they both had to work the following day. So both of them slept, and the next morning, Brad received a text message from Scarla, who said that she wouldn't be going to the office that day as she felt too sick. Brad thought that it was just the warm weather from spending the entire day at the garden which made Scarla so sick, so he never really thought much about it. And once he ended work that day, Brad immediately went to Scarla's home and brought along some food for her. To Brad's surprise, when Scarla opened the door, Scarla looked the most sick that Brad had ever seen her. Scarla looked pale. She had eye bags as though she hadn't slept for days and seemed really weak. Brad walked over to the kitchen and sat down for dinner with Scarla. As Brad suddenly thought about the photos they took at the garden the day before, Brad asked Scarla for her phone. Brad scrolled through the photos and eventually were looking at the selfies they took at the love tree. As he was scrolling through, Brad noticed something odd with one of the photos. He looked closely and saw somewhat of a transparent image from behind the love tree. It almost seemed like a face. Brad initially thought it was just probably a shadow. But as he scrolled to the rest of the photos taken at the love tree, he started to see the transparent image of the face becoming clear with every photo that he scrolled. Right at the last photo taken at the tree, Brad couldn't believe what he was seeing. Right where the couple took selfies, there was a ghostly white figure standing right beside the tree, right next to Scarla. The figure was in white dress, long black hair, white face, and white pupils. It was smiling, not at the camera, but slightly sideways as though it was looking at Scarla. That was when Brad almost freaked out. Brad initially wondered why Scarla hadn't noticed the white figure in their photos, but Brad then thought that Scarla probably didn't realize since she had taken probably 100 photos the day before. Brad then showed Scarla the photos. Brad was worried that Scarla would panic when she sees the photos, but Brad was confused when Scarla didn't react as he thought she would. Scarla looked confused and asked Brad about what exactly he wanted her to see. Thinking that Scarla probably didn't notice the image, Brad zoomed into the white figure and showed it to Scarla again. And again, Scarla didn't react. Brad became even more confused and asked Scarla if she couldn't see the white figure that couldn't be missed in the photos. Scarla told Brad that she still couldn't see anything or anyone in the photo besides the two of them. Taken aback for a brief moment and thinking if it was just him seeing things, Brad rubbed his eyes and looked at the photos again. And it was clear to see for him the white figure was still in the photos. Brad immediately knew that something wasn't right, that only he could see the figure. Without hesitation, Brad called his dad, whom he thought could help with the matter. An hour later, Brad's dad arrived at Scarla's home with a friend named Albert. Before Brad could show his dad the photos, Scarla's parents also arrived home from work. They were initially worried at what all the fuss was about. So after Brad told Scarla's parents about the photos that he saw, they too wanted to have a look. And like Scarla, they couldn't see the white figure in the photos. He then handed over the phone to his dad to see, and he too couldn't see anything either. Albert, who was standing right next to Brad's dad, looked at the phone. Albert stayed quiet and scrolled through the photos, as though he was analyzing something. Everyone else was silent. Albert then showed Brad the photo with the clearest view of the white figure, zoomed in, and asked Brad if this was the figure that he was seeing. Brad was surprised that Albert could see the figure, and he felt a slight sense of relief that he wasn't the only one. Albert told Brad that the reason that he could see the figure was that his sixth sense was beginning to open up. Albert then told Brad that the figure had evil intent, and it was unfortunate that when the couple were there, the evil spirit was roaming around the area. And by capturing a photo of it, in a way, opens a portal for it to enter our world and get close to Scarla. Albert said that it was the reason why Scarla was sick. Albert then shared with those at the home that a ritual would need to be done. They needed to print out the photos, delete the soft copy, and they would all need to go to the love tree again to throw the spirit back into its world. Albert said that it would be tough, but it was something that the family needed to do before Scarla gets more sick. The following night, all of them went over to the love tree again. There was hardly anyone left, no more buggy for the night visitors, and the walk to the love tree was rather eerie. And seeing how Scarla's health was deteriorating fast, there was no hesitation once they arrived at the tree. So Albert sat in front of the tree together with Brad and Scarla. Brad's dad and Scarla's parents sat behind them. The ritual began, and as Albert began chanting, the air surrounding them got colder, and Scarla began shivering and got weaker. Albert's chanting got louder, and then he finally stopped. Albert stayed silent. So was everyone else. Albert then looked up at the love tree. Everyone else did the same. That was when everyone saw what the photo had shown all along. It was the white figure squatting at the top of the tree. It was smiling down at the group as though it was mocking them for what they were doing. It was as though the chants had no effect on the evil spirit. Albert continued chanting again as he stared right up the tree. Suddenly, the white figure floated, slowly, towards Albert, before eventually sitting right in front of him. Albert was shaken but stayed brave for the group. Albert told the group to not fear as he continued chanting before attempting to burn the photos. Suddenly, the white figure disappeared into thin air. The group thought that it was over, and Albert, too, stopped chanting again. Brad then turned to look at Albert, and that was when he saw that Albert's pupils were all white. No one was sure what was going on. Was it over? Had Albert thrown the spirit back into its world? As Brad was still looking at Albert, Brad heard Scarla growling. Brad immediately turned to look. Scarla's pupils, too, were completely white. Brad knew that something was wrong. He looked behind and saw his dad and Scarla's parents all looking terrified. Suddenly, in sync, Albert and Scarla began rocking back and forth. And gradually the rocking got faster and more aggressive. Brad knew something was wrong but didn't know what to do. Albert and Scarla seemed possessed as they suddenly stood up and began dashing forward past the love tree and into the darkness. The others tried to give chase but couldn't see what was in front due to the darkness of the garden. They knew that the ritual had gone horribly wrong. So they called the police, who came down almost immediately. For days, the police tried to search for Albert and Scarla, but there was completely no sign of them. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months. There was no closure either for Brad nor for Scarla's parents. Hope was slowly lost. They were never found. Till this day, Brad always regretted that he agreed with Scarla to go to the love tree. If only he had known and went against Scarla's idea, none of it would have happened. If only Brad knew how dangerous the love tree really was.